Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be part of this new initiative. It's a really positive thing to be collaborating with so many partners from across the city and doing such great work. I was a little worried about whether I was qualified to be chair of the commission until Lord Deben said you needed to be difficult and irritating, and then I thought, well, actually I'm pretty well suited to that, as lots of people here will attest. What we're going to do now is talk about the update to the Mini Stern review for Leeds, which we completed 6 or 7 years ago. This has been a collaborative project with lots of people involved, some of whom are not listed here, but I need to pay particular thanks to Andrew Sudmont and Joel Millward-Hopkins, and also Rafael Luciano-Ortiz, who've been the real powerhouse behind this analysis. They've done amazing work and worked incredibly hard for many months on this piece of work. So to provide some context, Leeds has a population of 750,000 people and an economy generating £21 billion a year. So it's a big city, and we have capabilities, but we also have a footprint and a wider responsibility. So Leeds currently spends £1.2 billion a year on energy in its totality. So that's to heat our houses and fuel our cars and to power our industries and everything. So that's an enormous chunk of our income, which is spent on energy. Roughly 6% of everything we earn as a whole in the city leaves our local economy as we pay our energy bill. So that's a huge leakage. And if we can plug that leakage, we can create enormous benefits. So since 2005, the city's energy bill has increased by 6%. So bearing in mind that the global energy prices are at a historic low and they've still gone up in that period, that's significant. But its carbon emissions in that period have fallen by 26%. So that's a major drop, largely the consequence of national level initiatives and of structural change in our economy and of technological advance and as a result of all the great things that have happened in the city. So these carbon emissions are spread fairly equally across a number of sectors in the city, and all of those sectors need to be involved in helping to achieve our carbon reduction targets, which are 40% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. And of course, there's an argument that we should be going even further for a 1.5 degrees future. What we found in our new analysis, which was completed just in the last few days, perilously close to today actually, was that Leeds could save £277 million a year as a city just by doing the profitable things. One of our challenges when we published the Mini Stern 5 or 6 years ago was that if there was an opportunity for Leeds to bring in that level of income and to generate that amount of extra prosperity in the city, for example by persuading a major corporate to relocate here, what lengths would we go to? How much energy would we deploy in order to stimulate that level of investment to generate that level of prosperity? And one of our arguments was, well, we should be doing the same here. That's an enormous saving, an enormous boost to our local economy. And whether or not you care about climate change, and of course you should be excited and mobilizing, deploying all of your energies to bring in that kind of level of investment. And savings for particular sectors, transport costs could be reduced by £150 million a year. Household energy bills by £81 million a year. Running costs for our schools, hospitals, offices, restaurants and so on could be cut by £31 million a year. And business operating costs, industry costs, could be cut by £14 million a year. Last but not least, doing this, we calculate, could save or create, 4,200 extra years of employment. An enormous amount of employment creation, of high quality, well-paid jobs in the city. And again, we should be, ambitious in our attempts to stimulate the economy and provide all of those social benefits as a consequence. Now, in the report, and the full report will be published very shortly, and we are happy to discuss it at one of the Leeds Climate Forum events in a few weeks' time. Please sign up to the website if you want more details. We'll be outlining the key issues, and this table shows the most carbon-effective options for the city. So there are some highly effective things which we could be doing to cut carbon within the city. some in the domestic sector, some in the commercial sector. There are some very effective things we could be doing in industry, and again in the domestic and commercial sector, and some pretty effective things we could be doing in transport as well. In terms of cost effectiveness, then some of these things are massively profitable. So things like improving cooling in retail buildings, enhancing insulation in the domestic sector, promoting hybrid and electric vehicles, improving the appliances we use. All of these things would generate very significant paybacks. So the argument that this is not economically beneficial is not a sustainable one. There are enormous benefits to be had from making these kinds of investments. So what about the carbon impact of this, and how much would doing all of this help us to achieve our targets? Well, this graph shows both the baseline, the blue line, which is what we predict would happen to Leeds' carbon emissions if we carry on and don't do anything extra at the local level. So obviously that's not what we want to do. We want to do a lot extra, but it does show that decarbonising national electricity grids, for example, or improving fuel efficiency of vehicles will help us to reduce our carbon emissions, at least directly. We could argue about our wider consumption-based impacts, but directly our emissions will fall. Now, if we just did the cost-effective things, the profitable options that would more than cover their costs over their lifetime, we'll switch to the orange line. So that's a huge carbon cut, but as you can see, it still falls short of what we need to be doing in order to meet our 2030 target, and it falls still shorter of where we need to be by 2050. So if we were to reinvest all of those savings up to the point where there was no net cost, neither an extra cost or an extra benefit from doing this, then we would get to the grey line. And if we did everything that we currently know about, we would get to the yellow line. So there's a famous phrase amongst some of the climate community, which is that in order to meet our targets, you can choose any low-carbon option you like, as long as you choose all of them. And that's kind of true here too. We need to be ambitious, much more ambitious than just doing the economically beneficial things if we're to meet those longer-term targets. And in terms of the investment needs, which are very real, for the cost-effective option, we would need to invest £2.2 billion. Now, that's a huge amount of money, and one of the major challenges for the Climate Commission is to think about how collectively we as a city can stimulate that level of investment. Now, some of that will happen anyway. Rational organisations will be investing in improving their energy efficiency. Rational homeowners will be doing the same, and so on and so on. But nonetheless, there's still an enormous investment need associated with just doing the cost-effective options. If we spread it over the 14 years or so to 2030, that only equates to 0.7% of GDP for the city. So that ought to be affordable, but in absolute terms, it's still an enormous level of investment. If we switch to the cost-neutral level of investment, which means recycling those benefits, then we go further, but the costs go up. And if we go to the technical potential, then the costs go up even further. So £12 billion of investment over the next 14 years is an enormous ask for the city. So this gives us the scale of our challenge as a Climate Commission in terms of the level of investment we need to attract and enable and stimulate within the city. Of course, it's not us. We are a facilitator, an independent agency, if you like. It's everybody else in the city, all the businesses, all the organisations, all the members of the public. So this still leaves a gap, and we need to look at what we should be doing, where we should be prioritising. And this graph shows something of the gap. And what we as a commission need to do, is to understand what those priorities are and focus on some of the easy wins so that we build momentum, build capability, build confidence and enthusiasm, and then use all of that to go on to do some of the more challenging things that lie down the line. So we are in the process of doing that. Yesterday we were speaking to some large investors who were very enthusiastic potentially about investing in the city. And it's that real delivery agenda, the real kind of nuts and bolts and the hard miles associated with delivery that the Commission really has to engage with to ensure that we do deliver. So what are our conclusions from the study? Well, firstly, that there are huge opportunities to stimulate enormous investments in Leeds that would do all of these kind of things and generate win-win outcomes for the city. And we want to have these positive spillover effects. We want to energise the city and celebrate the success stories and build our capabilities and create a vibrant, inclusive, compassionate city, as Judith was talking about. The Leeds Climate Commission can identify the priority areas, and we can begin to enable delivery on some of the easier options. But we also need to learn lessons and build capacities for some of the harder things that still need to be done. And we need to develop real plans for funding and delivery, and as I've just said, that's one of our key priority areas. And we need to learn from success stories, and by the way, there are 21 fantastic success stories on our website, which came up today, which begin to celebrate these successes. If you know of others, please let us know. You know, there's so much happening in the city that many people are unaware of, that by promoting that good news and telling people the story of these successes, we can encourage other people to change and act as well. Just a quick plug at the end. The Leeds Mini Stern from 6 years ago changed my life, to be frank. And since then, we have been asked to do mini sterns for many other cities in the UK and also around the world. Excuse me. Today, we've published a new website linked to the Leeds Climate Commission, which publishes mini sterns for every local authority across the UK. So there are 50 cities listed here, and the analysis shows what the 50 cities can be doing, but they're also there for every other local authority. Now, the first mini-stern we did 6 years ago took 2 years of people effort, and we've just today published 400 and something of these. And if you look in the eyes of Andrew and Joel, you may see the pain that that's caused. But we're very excited to have done that, and we're hoping that, you know, Leeds' example is replicated, and the idea of the Climate Commission and the idea of bringing organisations together to take action in this area will be replicated in other cities around the world. We've also done it in China, in India, in Brazil, and many other cities. So we have an international link for this work too. And I genuinely believe here that Leeds is a real leader, and we're proud to be part of that and happy to be, you know, driving the Commission with Tom and the City Council and all of the other members of the Commission who are giving their time and energy to create what we hope will be a really positive endeavour. Thank you.